seem to be prose, meaning it's like hard to figure out. It's not in shloka form. So how should we read this? Recitation tends to be difficult in this. Just
usually we just the speaker is reading the prose and then word for word. We can.
Word, okay, then all together word by word. Okay.
Матвей, не будете переводить?
Я буду сейчас пока сяду стих.
Скажите, пожалуйста, какой стих?
13-й.
Тогда вы не знаете стих, тогда я не могу
5-9-13.
читать. У меня нету этого.
5-9-13.
Нету этого.
Okay, let's see. Tasya hadaiva muktasya pasho padavim tad anuchara paridhavanto nishitha samaye tamasa vrikayam anadhikata pashava akashmikena vidina kedaran virashanena mrika varahadibhyaha samrakshamanam angira pravara shutam apashyan. So tasya of the leader of the dacoits.
Of the leader of the dacoits.
Certainly. Daiva muktasya.
Daiva muktasya.
By chance having escaped. Pashoha.
Pashoha.
Of the human animal.
Of the human animal.
Padavim. catching the man animal.
not catching the man animal.
Akashmikena virina,
Akashmikena vidina,
by the unexpected law of providence.
by the unexpected law of providence.
Kedaran,
Kedaran,
the fields.
the fields.
Vira ashanena,
Vira ashanena,
by a seat on a raised place.
by a seat on a raised place.
Mriga varaha adibhyaha,
Mriga varaha divyaha,
from the deer, wild pigs, and so on.
from the deer, wild pigs, and so on.
Sangrakshamanam,
Samrakshamanam,
protecting.
protecting.
Angirapravarasutam,
Angirapravarasutam,
the son of the Brahmana,
the
Son of the Brahmana.
descending from the Angira family.
descending
from the Angira
family.
Apashyan,
Apashyan,
they found.
they
They
found.
found.
Translation: the leader of the dacoits captured a man animal for sacrifice, but he escaped, and the leader ordered his followers to find him. They ran in different directions, but could not find him. Wandering here and there in the middle of the night, covered by dense darkness, they came to a paddy field where they saw the exalted son of the Angira family, Jadabharata, who was sitting in an elevated place, guarding the field against the attacks of deer and wild pigs. No purport to this one, but there's one for the next one, so just read through that one. Athata enam manavadya lakshanam avamrishya bhartri karmanispattim manyamana badhva rasanaya chandika griham upaninyor muda vikashita vadanaha. Yeah. So, just one out from the word by word. So, Chandika Griham, in the home of Chandika. So that's translated as temple of goddess Kali. So, goddess has different names. That's the point. So, in Sanskrit, Kali is not there, but it's in word by word. So, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada. The followers and servants of the dacoit chief considered Jada Bharata to possess qualities quite suitable for a man animal, and they decided that he was a perfect choice for sacrifice. Their faces bright with happiness, they bound him with ropes and brought him to the temple of the goddess Kali. Purport: in some parts of India, animalistic men are still sacrificed before the goddess Kali. However, such a sacrifice is only performed by Shudras and dacoits. Their business is to plunder the wealthy, and to become successful, they offer an animalistic man before the goddess Kali. It should be noted that they never sacrifice an intelligent man before the goddess. In the body of a Brahmana, Bharata Maharaja appeared deaf and dumb. Yet he was the most intelligent man in the world. Nonetheless, being completely surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he remained in that condition and did not protest being brought before the deity for slaughter. As we have learned from the previous verses, he was very strong and could have very easily avoided being bound with ropes, but he did not do anything. He simply depended on the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his protection. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura describes surrender unto the Supreme Lord in this way. Mara Birakavi Yoitsatohara Nitya Dasa Pratituya Adhikara. My Lord, I am now surrendered unto you. I am your eternal servant, and And if you like, you can kill me, or if you like, you can protect me. In any case, I am fully surrendered unto you. So, Om Gyanati Mirandasya Gyanandana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishvaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutaya Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Samantina. So, this is one of those sections in the scripture which are clearly descriptive rather than prescriptive. So, scripture sometimes have places which are giving instructions. This is what you definitely should do. Sometimes it's not really clear prescription or prohibition, but it's in the form of recommendation that this would be really good if you did this. This is neither. It's describing a scenario of what kind of forms a religious life can take when people are attracted by the mode of ignorance or tamas. Okay? So, just let me know what is wrong.
Ну, на своей волне там и...
Shall I continue? Okay. So, Bhagavad Gita 17th chapter specifically is about describing different ways of practicing spirituality, religiosity, and particularly when it's not guided by scripture. So, 15th chapter describes the tree of the material world. There's a tree metaphor upside down, and there are different branches, and the leaves of that tree are the Vedic hymns. Now the Vedic hymns are specifically giving instructions for people under the different modes, but at least they are following some prescription, and by that they are learning the art of following instructions and being guided by a higher authority. So essentially it's like at least a step towards the right direction, even though it might take a long time to be elevated from tamas through rajas to sattva and then to transcendence, but at least there's a chance. Now then the 16th chapter describes how it looks if somebody not only rejects the scripture, but then also goes all the way towards just selfishness being promoted as the only, not only the most important, but the only principle in life. So that the asura, not really, the word dharma would be inappropriate. It's just the principle of being selfish is described in the 16th chapter. Sometimes people who are into that may actually superficially follow some form of religion, even Vedic religion, but when they are doing that, it's only to get social points. It's hypocritical, meaning there's no internal desire to serve God, to follow instructions, but because in a particular setting it looks good if I do this, like politicians kissing babies and going to church like that. Even today we can see, like, sometimes it's taking place that somebody's like, yeah, now it looks good if I kiss or pat the baby and people are taking photos. Or now it looks good if I go to the church because in this country it's considered like auspicious, like that. But internally there's no faith in any of that. There's only faith in the fact that I'm the center of everyone's attention, and this is for me the way to get the attention right now, so let me now act as if I was actually religious. But then obviously there are quite a few people who are not really following the Vedic frame, and they are also not fully egoistical psychopaths. In other words, there's a large area of grey in between the black and white, and the 17th chapter is then describing like what about the rest of people, and then there we have specifically how does religion in the mode of or spiritual practice in the mode of ignorance look like, and
Она не успевает. Не успевает переводить.
Speak small, чуть-чуть меньше, это она не успевает.
slow.
She can't keep up the translation.
Oh, slow down.
Да.
Yeah, okay.
It's okay, but little bit. If you could speak a little bit slow, but it's
Yeah,
okay
yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just
Потому что
thinking.
это не лекция такого.
Yeah, I will try to slow down. So, tamasic religiosity is mentioned being about worshipping ghosts and spirits. So, somehow Goddess Kali is not mentioned in the 17th chapter. It's ghosts and spirits. So now back to the Vedic frame, because this is actually now I find this getting fascinating. Worship of Goddess Kali is actually part of the Vedic tradition, but that can be following the scripture, or it can also go against the scripture. So this particular instance is related to when there is no framing with the scripture whatsoever. But these people still have an idea that the goddess is a really powerful creature and she can fulfill our desires if we worship her, and then figuring out what would be pleasing to her. Now, there is this, I think, originally Buddhist piece of wisdom that the world looks to us as we are. Everyone sees the world through his or her own frame of reference. Based on my mentality, then I think that the whole world is like this. So let's say somebody is peaceful and sattvic, and that person tends to see compassion and peace everywhere. Somebody is ambitious, and for that person the whole world looks like a place of competition. Now if somebody is tamasic, aggressive and violent, then that person will see opportunities for violence. That person will also inspire aggression in others, and that person will be naturally attracted to places where violence and aggression and tamasic things are being expressed. So these are dacoits. They are making their living by robbing people, by killing people, by having their way using violence if necessary. So it makes actually sense that in their own internal twisted frame of reverence they think, well, violence is what we are anyway doing, and this Kali seems to be a really violent form of goddess, so maybe she will be pleased if we do the ultimate act of violence and sacrifice, kill a human being for her. Probably she'll be most pleased with us. So even though for us it might like, oh, this is like all the way down, like you cannot get any more crazy than this, except Jarasandha got even more crazy because he was not planning to kill like hundreds of kings, not only one. So you can scale it up, but the basic principle is human sacrifice tends to be the lowest of the low. That it's hard to imagine getting lower than that. So this is real. Like there are and have been and will be some people who actually think that killing another person is a good idea. It can be framed in a religion. It's a form of expressing our sincere devotion. I mean, that's the three modes. Like when you go all the way to tamas, then everything gets upside down. And to illustrate that this can actually become an organized state religion, let us illustrate this with the kingdom of the Aztecs in the Mesoamerica. Just before the Spaniards arrived, there was a period, we know from historical records, that particularly, I mean, human sacrifice probably was going on in some scale, like for a long time, but approximately a little prior to when the Spaniards arrived, there was a historical phase where it got totally out of hand. There was a, I don't remember the name of the divinity, but was a kind of a war god, and then to please that divinity, then really large scale and systematic human sacrifice was institutionalized. Like that was taking place all the time. So that was a state religion in one country, and not so removed from our times actually. That's like 500 years ago. So the point is that these people are there, and when Tamas takes over, then suddenly sacrificing a human being starts looking like the most obvious thing. So getting blessings from the goddess. So this is tamasic, but it has a Vedic ingredient in the sense that they don't invent their own deity. Kali is a real person, and there's a valid way of worshipping her. So this brings me to the next point, namely the topic of Shaktism. So Shaktism refers in South Asian context to a religious practice which is following the Vedic revelation, but the focus is predominantly on the female, like the goddess is the supreme. Now this takes many forms. So there's, to just give a few illustrations, there's the worship of the goddess in the form of Lalita Tripura Sundari. So she's a beautiful form of the goddess, very benevolent and kind and nurturing. It's easy to understand why to be attracted to her. And then the worship towards her is then subdivided. Some are really, there's a school or lineage which is trying, they are doing their best to align it all with the Veda and with the Brahminical system, kind of doing it as in the mainstream of the Vedic or Hindu society. But then there's another orientation, and this is associated with Kaula. That's the name. Kula just means family, and Kaula is those who are like following that, and that's related to the left hand or left side of Tantra, which means going against the mainstream. In this context, sometimes there's sacrifices or rituals which are including intoxicants, maybe consuming forbidden substances such as meat and fish, but in a ritual context. So that's going against the mainstream, and mainstream will look at this with suspicion. But this is all part of worship of the goddess in the form of Lalita. Now, then there's another prominent brand of goddess worship, and that is centering around Kali and other fierce and scary forms of the goddess. Okay? And there the idea is that this is a scary form, but it's a really powerful form, and there's many scary things in this world, and I'd better have the scary source of all that power on my side, you know. So great power and something being scary is kind of scary if it's against you, but if it's on your side, then that kind of changes the constellation. Anyway, so then this can be framed within broadly in the Vedic tradition, but then there is well-known like worship of goddess is called Gramya Devata, a village goddess, and this is most often not done, the worship is not done by the village brahmanas. This is folk religion. So this is kind of part of the folk religion, but the most tamasic version of it. But did you know to Shaktism, worship of the goddess. So far I've been describing within the three modes, okay? But there's such a thing as Shuddha Shaktism. This is according to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura. And Shuddha Shaktism is when Gaudiya Vaishnavas revere Radharani as the most important object of worship. Because Radharani is actually the one who can even attract Krishna, so that Krishna feels, I don't understand her love. I willingly become subservient to her love. So this is the official presentation. Like, you can analyze Srila Prabhupada's books. How often did his repeat the words Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and referring to Krishna? That's there all of the time. Whereas, how many times does he mention Radharani? How many times does Sukadeva Goswami mention Radharani? I counted in a hidden way in Bhagavatam. I found at least 2 instances where the word Radha is kind of part of a larger word related to worship. And the idea here was that for Sukadeva Goswami, who is on the topmost spiritual platform, a Mahabhagavata, Brahman realized since birth. Now he's speaking Bhagavatam. That's even for him the high point of his life. He's probably been waiting for, I really wish there was at least one person who could understand the treasure that I'm carrying in my heart. And finally the opportunity arises. Parikshit is fasting, and he is also a Mahabhagavata. It takes one to recognize one. So they mutually recognize one another's qualifications. And now the conversation then, which becomes the conversation we know as Bhagavatam, and this is part of it, then that takes place. And they both relish it. Can you imagine both kind of neglect eating and sleeping for 7 days because they get so carried away by the nectar of relishing Bhagavatam? Still, that being the case, Bhagavatam being Krishna in sound form, it's not only a narrative about Krishna. It is a narrative which is fully identical with Krishna. This is not different, just like Hare Krishna mantra is Krishna's sound avatar, the most merciful form of Krishna in his holy names. So Bhagavatam is essentially like a really long holy name, because it's like 16,000 shlokas. I don't know the exact number, but it's really long. But it's essentially Krishna is present in every word, every syllable. So Srila Prabhupada actually said on one lecture, if people somehow or other come in contact with Bhagavatam, if they get the book, if they touch the book, if they read a few pages, even if they read one word of Bhagavatam, they will be blessed forever. I mean, that's the kind of book we are dealing with. And in that context, still, the speaker, Sukadeva Goswami, according to the commentarial tradition, decides that if I start speaking openly about Radharani, I will faint out of ecstasy. That's his internal mood. Okay, so that's what we are talking about. So there's a female and male side to the Supreme, united in the esoteric and confidential form of Lord Gauranga. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu combines both, but coming in a hidden form, disguised as a devotee. But he really embodies both the male and the female, both being part of the Absolute. So God is one. Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a monotheistic tradition. It's not worshipping many gods. But what does it mean to be supreme? It does have to mean that whatever we have must in somehow be there in the perfect form. So we, in this world, there's a real attraction between male and female. That can be the source of the some of the most important experiences human life might be, and probably are, related to loving relationships between two persons, and particularly the romantic attraction. So how come we can enjoy that kind of relationship down here, and then in the world of the absolute that would not be there? It actually does not make sense. So logically one can understand that there has to be something like that. And so that is then illustrated in many ways. There is a relationship Sita and Rama, Lakshmi and Narayana. But the most perfect manifestation, but also the most hidden and confidential manifestation, is Radha and Krishna. And to protect the confidentiality of all that, that's why there's so much emphasis. Krishna is the supreme, that's the official side of God. And when we start talking about Radharani, that's the private side, that's confidential. One needs to be qualified. So it's definitely beyond my pay grade, but because it's a Bhagavatam class and one of the topics is worship of Goddess, I thought I would touch upon this topic. So Shuddha Shaktism, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that's actually Gaudiya Vaishnavism understood correctly. But it's the greatest secret, so it has to be guarded carefully so that people don't bring in their own materialistic conceptions into that. Just like what is taking place here, you know. This is kind of the illustration of how a good thing, worship of Goddess, can get totally twisted when people approach a good thing with like really twisted mindset. So there's three things. There's individual self, let's say you and me, anyone, individual who is then wanting to connect to the divine, God, Goddess, or maybe both, as in much of Vaishnavism actually, connecting to the divinity. And then, so there are two things which are good. The soul is inherently pure, and the supreme is inherently the most pure. There's no problem. But then there's something in between the two, and that's the mind. Mind is a constellation of three modes. So we can have a valid practice, a sincere, somewhat sincere practitioner, a valid object of worship. It's still possible to kind of pollute that all the way by bringing in all kinds of misconceptions. So that's why in spirituality, yoga, particularly bhakti yoga, devotional service, and in religion, all of these in same constellation, is of fundamental importance that people actually follow a system, and that there is a teacher, and there is a tradition, and there's a society of practitioners. So you have so many frames of reference. Most importantly, there's scripture. Everything is founded on scripture. But then the sadhus, those who are practicing, what are they? They are the living scripture. So there's a person Bhagavata and book Bhagavata. So the person Bhagavata is even more important if you can find one, because that person practically illustrates how it looks like in this world if somebody follows the system all the way. Now, that brings me to, let that be the last point of the class, that there is such a person right here on the in these verses. That's Jadabharata, because Srila Prabhupada explains that he could have escaped, but he's choosing not to. Now, what kind of practice is that? What is being illustrated here? Let's analyze this. He could free himself. That's what is clearly said, and he chooses not to. He's choosing to. If Krishna wants me dead today, I'm okay with that. So first of all, bodily identification in that point is as close to zero as we can just imagine. I mean, fear of death is the strongest sign of identifying with the body, because only the body dies, the mind does not die. We are actually carrying our minds, our subtle body, to the next life. But the physical body is the only one. There's a soul, there's subtle body, there's a karana deha consisting of subliminal impressions, and then there's physical body. Out of this, the physical body is the only one that dies. Everything else continues. So, fear of death is really the most fundamental manifestation of the fact that we are identifying with the body. Okay. So for somebody to feel like, Krishna, if you want me dead now, I'm okay with that. Even in this horrible context where they are kind of preparing to probably cut off my head with a knife, I'll be fine with that. So that means like somebody's totally identifying with the soul, having internally cultivating the relationship with Krishna, which is becoming so much into prominence that dying today is not a big deal. We have another illustration of the same actual. I mean, there are many, but I'm reminded now in Bhagavatam, there's another instance. So the illustration is, let's say, Chitraketu gets cursed, and then he is born as a demoniac creature who is a great warrior. And then he challenges Indra and is getting the upper hand, and then Indra feels despondent. Then he's kind of encouraging, hey, don't be a sissy, pick up your weapon, fight like a man on the battlefield. He's encouraging, he wants to have a fight, but in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking, yeah, but I also kind of, this incarnation right now here is not really where I can all the time fully manifest my inner devotion, so let this end. So he encouraging Indra, fight like a hero. Now Indra does, and then the final scene in this battle is Bhagavatam describing Indra cuts off his head, and that takes 1 year to cut off. This must be a really big head. Anyway, so some of the time scales and numbers in Bhagavatam seem to be a little bit figurative because Chitraketu has 10 million wives and this and that, and the third person has the power of 10,000 elephants and like that. So it seems like some of the numbers are meant to be kind of, yeah, it was huge, and yeah, it was big, and yeah, it was intense. So whatever it was, it's an intense experience if somebody cuts off your head and it takes a long time. That's the point here. But according to Bhagavatam, it's what's his name? The warrior. There's Virabhadra and Vritra. That's Vritra, yeah, right? Vritrasura, yeah. So the point is that who was previously Chitraketu is a great devotee, is a pure devotee, always thinking of God. And he's not now so absorbed in thinking of his beloved Supreme that he doesn't even notice that somebody is cutting off his head. That's unusual, to say the least. But this is Jadabharata, one canto prior to that, illustrating the same. Krishna, if you want to take me, I'm fine with that. I mean, that could be the greatest blessing in this lifetime. There's so much yearning to be connected to his Lord that he doesn't mind being killed. He would actually welcome that. Now, as we know, when the story unfolds and there's like real saints in the narrative coming soon, let that be a cliffhanger. Those who don't know what is coming next, you really need to follow on the classes. It gets really interesting really soon. When Kali reveals her inner true nature, also as a great devotee. So the point is, sometimes the greatest of saints keep the treasure of their hearts hidden so that nobody else realizes what is going on. So for instance, in the case of Jadabharata, how are people actually, because nobody would know. I mean, he's guarding the field from pigs like that. He's used as a scarecrow, standing like this, that birds won't eat the seeds. Everyone thinks he's dumb, he's no good except as a scarecrow. He doesn't understand anything. Whereas Prabhupada he says he is the most intelligent man in the world. What does it mean, most intelligent? It doesn't necessarily mean that he's able to count faster than supercomputers or analyze difficult equations in quantum physics. What it means, he's fully directing all of his intelligence, buddhi, at the lotus feet of Krishna. That's the actual application of superior intelligence from bhakti point of view, and that's what he has. So, but nobody knows that. How will we actually recognize somebody who is great if externally there are no signs? We know it when the person speaks, not otherwise. And indeed, in the case of Jadabharata, he will only be recognized as the great saint and devotee that he always was. Only when King Rahugana complains, and then he responds to the complaint by giving his teachings to the king. And that's the full, I think, 3 chapters coming soon in Bhagavatam. And that's similar to Sukadeva Goswami. He didn't speak before that. He probably never spoke after that. But the one speech he gave kind of stopped everything. And even in that context, there's a narrative within narrative. The frame of Bhagavatam is there's a king who is getting teachings from a saint who never spoke before and probably never spoke after, but spoke once, and that's the Bhagavatam, essence of all knowledge. Within that narrative, I find it fascinating that soon there will be another instance where there's a king and there's a person who never spoke in his life, and then he opens his mouth and everyone realizes, no, this is the greatest saint of them all. And then he walks away and leaves it all. This is fascinating. So we can only recognize somebody's greatness actually when they speak, because they might actually fake in order to be left in peace. There are some other instances. Apparently Gaura Kishora Dasa Babaji, the spiritual master of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, sometimes wanted to be left alone, so he went to chant his japa in a place where there was a lot of smell, like close to a public toilet or something like that. Anyway, that's what I heard, at least. But the point is, one is so much just interested in being connected to Krishna that nothing else matters. So in the same way, sometimes there was a person who wanted to take shelter of Gaurakis, or can you give me some instructions? And then said, sure, leave everything and stay with me and chant the names of the Lord all day long. That's when he decided, okay, I will speak something. So leave everything, just stay with me, let's chant from morning till evening. But for somebody who is like, Krishna, you can take me today, I'm ready to die. For that person, there has to be another frame of reference, another source of pleasure, and that's relishing bhakti internally, as illustrated in this beautiful verse by Bhaktivinoda Thakura. I am now surrendered unto you, I am your eternal servant. If you like, you can kill me, or if you like, you can protect me. In any case, I am fully surrendered unto you, which is beautifully illustrated in this section by Jadabharata's full surrender, to the extent that he's just ready to die any moment, and that would not make any big difference from his internal point of view. He's anyway just lovingly thinking of the Lord all the time. Okay, so these are some of the points related to these verses. I end here. Do you have any questions or comments?
Можно? Джадабарада, он охранял рис. Ну, типа поля.
Что делал?
Поля охранял, вы что-то не слышите?
Охранял.
Поля.
Меня отсюда просто плохо слышно.
Да.
Джада Барада...
Поля охранял, поле.
Я забыла слово, как
Рисовые поля охранял.
He guarded fields,
Yeah.
rice fields.
Yes.
Да, и, наверное, по милости Кришны, там несли паланкин царя далеко.
And by Krishna's mercy, not so far, some people carried Rahugana on the palanquin.
Yeah.
И один носильщик подвинул ногу.
And one carrier, how to say, damaged his leg.
Yeah.
И тогда начали искать и не ходить везде, бегать, чтобы найти себе нового носильщика.
And they started looking for another person
Mm.
to replace that.
И они нашли Джадабараду.
Yes.
And they found Jadabarata,
Да, и он начал нести паланкин.
and he started to carry the palanquin.
Да, но так как он везде видел душу, он не мог на врага наступить, на камашку, и он все время останавливался, их пропускал, когда они проходили.
And Jadabarata, he didn't want to step on ants,
Ants,
and
yes.
yeah, he would oftentimes stop or jump.
Yeah.
И тогда царь возмутился, говорит, что вы так несете?
And then King Rahugana got angry at Jadabarata and asked him, why are you carrying me in this way?
Да, ну они говорят, что это не мы не виноваты, начали там бить, мы не виноваты, это тот нам мешает, он сильный и все останавливает.
And the other carriers, they said, let's see, sorry, they said that the Jadabarata is the faulty person.
И
You can blame him.
тогда его подвели к царю, и царь говорит, что начали его там обзывать, там ругать царь.
And they started chastising him, Jadabaratu.
А он говорит, ты можешь делать со мной что хочешь, ну как вы уже сказали, что хочешь со мной делать, но я не это делаю и так далее. И тогда царь понял, что это святой человек, и уже начал с ним общаться.
And then Jadbharata said, you can do to me whatever you like. And he said, I'm not this body. And then King Rahugana realized that Jadbharata was a very elevated soul.
А можно еще вопрос?
And can I ask one more question? That was his addition, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, probably that's the next chapter.
Yeah,
so
next chapter.
Это
Secret.
следующая глава была. То, что вы рассказали, это все будет.
it will come. It's
Это будет.
after
Следующая
some
глава.
classes we
будем
will actually
изучать.
enter that. It's gonna take.
Вопрос.
Okay, can I ask a question? Lisa?
Да. Мне вот это интересно, как вот, допустим, душа прогрессирует, если она попадает из тела коровы, там, или обезьяны, попадает в человека, а потом она попадает в аборигена, к примеру, в аборигене, и она там, допустим, они там друг друга едят, и уже нельзя подняться в форму человеческую. И тогда душа падает вниз в тела животных. І потім вона вже не може піднятися вище, а потім йде по еволюції. Як взагалі оцей сам прогрес совершається? Як душа піднімається вище, вище, вище?
So there are maybe species of life, and he is curious to know how a soul progresses from one species of life to another, how it happens.
How? So it's according to Sankhya.
В соответствии с Sankhya philosophy.
So there's a mental manifestation, there's a mentality first, and then from that develops the physical body. Yeah. So it's a progression of mentality. Okay. So when the mind changes, then one is ready to go to the next one. if somebody develops by behavior and by choices like an animal mentality, then based on that, then one will be born in like an animal body. And then coming up, there's like dealing with that karma, and when that is purified, then the mind is also purified, and one can get elevated back to a human life. So now the other one is, if in human life one practices how to elevate the mind, for instance by spiritual practice, by cleanliness, by honesty, by chanting japa, by respecting prasadam, then that will elevate the mind, and then it means the next birth will be either a human birth where one can start practicing bhakti from the very beginning of life, or when we will get born into a higher world. So that's the basic principle of how the soul transmigrates from one body to another body. So we're making choices and then developing a particular kind of mentality, and then when it's time to move to the next one, then the mentality then will be matched in appropriate body and environment. So that's how it works. Anything else? Yes?
You mentioned this form of goddess Kali called Lalita Tripura Sundari.
Yes.
There's a name of Krishna.
I didn't.
called Tripura.
Yeah, just a second. I didn't say it was necessarily a form of Kali. It's a form of goddess worship, and the idea here is that the same goddess taking different forms. So, but I was not indicating that Kali is the primary form and that's a secondary form. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
There's a name of Krishna called Tripurari, I believe.
Yeah.
And Tripura is a city, right?
Yeah. Well, it's actually 3 cities.
Okay, could you explain the connection, if there is a connection?
Yeah, so the idea is that in one of the Puranic narratives there's this city, actually triple city, which is invincible, and then the Asuras attack the Devas from that triple city, and there's no way to fight back because they have this invincible fortress.
Is it not that flying? It's not the flying city, right?
Not sure. What's a flying city? Maybe it's a flying city, I don't know.
Spaceship.
Yeah, that's all I know. I'm not familiar with the details of this narrative, but that's like Tripurari is the enemy of that. That would refer to Shiva, who took an active role in that battle. Okay, but then Tripura Sundari, yeah, I think it's a valid question. So I don't actually know the origins of the name. Sundari means beautiful, but how it's related to the city, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Do you know? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of information we don't directly get in Bhagavatam, which is in other Puranas, and some of them which are important in Shaivism and Shaktism, they may have all sorts of fascinating details about this, and I'm sure in some of the Shaiva Puranas you would get the full scope of the story. But if you're interested, maybe you can go to Wikipedia and just check. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. Anything else? You have a question? No? Okay. Yeah. So we end here. Oh, do you, ladies, do you have a question? No? Okay. So, thank you. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
послушайте, Радарани. Шилпрапада сколько лекций за 10 лет дал? Огромное количество лекций. Почти никогда не говорил Шримати Радарани. Почему? Потому что рано или поздно мы к этому придем, помимо всего. Потому что я первые годы, у меня эта тема даже для меня была закрыта. Потому что только потом чуть-чуть она начала немножко открываться, совсем чуть-чуть. И то даже сейчас я особо сильно не лезу. Я пытаюсь Шилпрападу понять, пытаюсь Гаурнитай понять. Какой там Радарани? Это high level. Иначе сахаджи будет.
Что такое сахаджи?
Сейчас объясню эту тему сахаджи.